Hello friends, welcome aboard the Sleepy Fairy Tale Express. I'm the Red Mermaid. This train is a dream journey to fairy tale land. Have you all got your train tickets? Subscribe and hit the like button to always be able to ride. Close your eyes, prick up your ears, and listen in a comfortable position. Today's story is Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, in a very distant past, there was an era when the boundaries of the world were blurred and magic existed. The land of that time shone with a verdant green, and the sky stretched wide and clear like a vast blue sea. As the sun dipped beyond the horizon, golden waves of light blanketed the world, while the stars whispered of hope and dreams, gently illuminating the night sky. The mountains stood majestic and silent, and the rivers that flowed between them were as clear and transparent as crystal. This was a land filled with people who lived in harmony with nature. Rich crops and flowers bloomed abundantly in every corner of the villages, carried on the scent of the wind that enveloped the entire community. In the forests, diverse animals lived peacefully, and the rivers provided the villagers with water and convenience for their daily lives. Trees boasted their verdant foliage throughout the seasons, and beneath their shade, children laughed and played. At the heart of this beautiful land stood a magnificent castle. Adorned with gold and silver, the castle was a splendid structure adorned with colorful jewels. Its walls were sturdy and high, guarded by soldiers who always stood watch. The castle's gardens bloomed with flowers and trees throughout the seasons, with small ponds and fountains interspersed among them. The gardens were always alive with the chirping of birds and the fluttering of butterflies. In this castle lived a beloved king and queen. The king was courageous yet compassionate, while the queen was wise and beautiful. They deeply loved each other and ruled their kingdom with peace and prosperity. Every morning, the king and queen strolled through the gardens hand in hand, sharing their love. Their love radiated happiness to all in the palace, and the people revered and followed them. These two, the king and queen, were truly an ideal couple. The king possessed bravery coupled with a compassionate nature, while the queen was wise and beautiful. They deeply loved each other and ruled their kingdom with peace and prosperity. The queen particularly enjoyed tending to the flowers in the garden. Under her care, the garden always remained beautiful, and the flowers she nurtured bloomed in various colors with each passing season. Whenever the queen gently touched the petals, the flowers seemed to bloom even more brightly. Spending time in the garden brought peace and happiness to her heart. The king enjoyed watching the queen tend to the flowers in the garden. He would often sit beside her, reading a book or simply admiring the beauty of the garden together. As the queen cared for the flowers, the king would hold her hand, looking at her with affectionate eyes. They held deep affection for each other, spreading happiness throughout the palace. They respected each other and always found strength in each other's company. However, There was one great sorrow for this seemingly perfect couple: they had no children. A child was the fruit of their love and the hope for the future of their kingdom, so they yearned for one deeply. Every night, the queen prayed beneath the moonlight, kneeling by the pond with her hands clasped together. "Oh, divine of the heavens, grant us a child. Bless us with a little life to share our love." Her voice carried on the wind, and the ripples of the pond gently swayed. The queen's prayers grew more fervent with each passing day, her heart filled with a strong desire for a child. She gazed at the ripples of the pond, earnestly wishing for her desire to be fulfilled. The king, more than anyone, understood the queen's heart. To comfort her, every night he would sit with her, gazing at the stars and sharing stories. "My beloved queen, our wish will surely come true. The stars in the sky will grant our desires." Holding her hand, he reassured her. "How wonderful it would be if we had a child," sighed the queen deeply. Her eyes always held a hint of sadness, which pained the king's heart. Every morning, as they strolled through the garden, the queen harbored a fervent wish for a child. Though the garden was filled with vibrant flowers, a corner of her heart always felt empty. She gently whispered to each petal, "May our lives be blessed with new life, just like this beautiful garden." The king understood the queen's heartache more than anyone. To console her, every night he sat with her, gazing at the stars and sharing stories. "My beloved queen, our wish will surely come true. The stars in the sky will grant our desires." Holding her hand, he reassured her. Every night, the queen knelt by the small pond in the garden, praying fervently. "O divine of the heavens, grant us a child. Bless us with a little life to share our love." Her voice carried on the wind, and the ripples of the pond gently swayed. Their prayers grew more earnest with each passing day, and their longing deepened. They comforted each other, believing that their wish would one day be fulfilled. "My beloved queen, our wish will surely come true. The stars in the sky will grant our desires." The king held her hand and spoke to her. One day, the king and queen were taking a stroll in the garden. The sky was clear and blue, and a gentle breeze blew. Hand in hand, they admired the beautiful flowers in the garden, which seemed to bloom even more vibrantly, as if welcoming them. The queen touched the petals with a small smile, and the king held her hand tightly, gazing at her with warmth in his eyes. Suddenly, they heard a faint sound in the distance. It was the gentle ripple of water coming from the pond. The king and queen listened intently to the sound. The ripples grew louder, giving the impression that something was approaching. The sunlight danced on the surface of the water, sparkling like starlight. The queen walked towards the pond where water lilies bloomed, and amidst them, a small frog emerged. It hopped onto the bank and sat in front of the queen. She looked at the frog with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Suddenly, the tranquility of the pond was disrupted as the waves rippled. Amidst the sparkling waves reflecting the sunlight, a small frog leaped out of the water. But this frog was no ordinary one. Its green body shimmered like a jewel in the sunlight, and its large eyes were filled with wisdom and compassion. The queen looked at the frog with astonishment and curiosity. The frog approached the queen cautiously and sat before her. Its movements were graceful and mysterious, like that of a fairy. The frog looked directly at the queen and softly spoke, "Queen, your wish will soon be granted." Its voice was gentle and serene, like the calm waves. The queen was taken aback by these words. The fact that a frog could speak was astonishing enough, but that it knew of their wish was even more mysterious. She asked the frog cautiously, finding it hard to believe, "Is it true? Can our wish really come true?" The frog nodded its head and repeated, "Yes, Queen. Do not lose faith. A miracle will soon occur." The queen felt a deep sense of joy and hope blossom in her heart upon hearing the frog's words. She thanked the frog sincerely and treasured its words in her heart. Hurrying to the king by the pond, she shared this astonishing news. Holding each other's hands tightly, the king and queen fervently hoped for the fulfillment of this mysterious prophecy. After hearing the frog's words, the queen began to quietly pray by the pond every night. She made a firm decision to believe in the frog's prophecy. "O divine of the heavens, grant us a child. Bless us with a little life to share our love." Her voice carried on the wind, and the ripples of the pond gently swayed. The queen's prayers became even more earnest. Hope began to take root in her heart. The king, sensing the change in the queen, grew to love her even more. To comfort her, he joined her every night by the pond, gazing at the stars and sharing stories. "My beloved queen, our wish will surely come true. The stars in the sky will grant our desires," he said warmly, holding her hand. Encouraged by the king's words, the queen gained courage and began to believe that their wish would soon be fulfilled. After the fairy disappeared, the queen carefully held on to the water lily and returned to the palace with the king. Her heart was filled with both excitement and anxiety. Thoughts of whether the fairy's words would truly come to pass, if their wish would finally be granted, consumed her mind. Every morning, the queen would silently pray while gazing at the water lily. Its fragrance gently filled the palace, almost as if it was imbuing her with hope and courage. Holding the water lily in her hands, she would recall the warm voice of the fairy, feeling hope blossoming deep within her heart. Yet, doubts lingered in a corner of her mind. Will the frog's words really come true? the queen wondered to herself. Each night, she would gaze at the starry sky, recalling the fairy's prophecy. Sensing her turmoil, the king would smile warmly and say, "It will happen just as the fairy said. Let us not lose faith and wait patiently." His comforting words became a source of strength for the queen, and she held on to hope deeply in her heart. The news of the fairy's visit and the frog's prophecy spread rapidly throughout and beyond the palace. The courtiers and servants inside the palace were astonished and filled with wonder upon hearing this remarkable story. It quickly circulated among everyone in the palace, and they gathered to convey congratulations and messages of hope to the king and queen. Outside the palace walls, the news also spread swiftly. People from all over the kingdom flocked to the palace to hear about this miraculous tale. Gatherings formed in the marketplaces, where people discussed the astonishing prophecy. Believing in the words of the frog and the fairy, the people began to harbor hope that the long-held wishes of the king and queen would finally come true. Children in the streets mimicked the tales of the frog and the fairy, while villagers shared the news with each other, spreading joy. This story brought immense happiness and hope to everyone in the village. The entire kingdom buzzed with excitement over this miraculous news, and people prayed for the king and queen, earnestly hoping that their wishes would be fulfilled. That year, a miraculous event occurred in the queen's womb. She was finally pregnant. This news brought immense joy to the entire kingdom. Upon hearing this, the king and queen tearfully embraced each other. They couldn't believe this miracle and offered prayers of gratitude to the heavens. The queen became even more cautious after her pregnancy. Every morning, she would stroll through the garden, feeling the life growing inside her womb. The flowers in the garden bloomed more beautifully, and the songs of birds sounded more cheerful. Sitting by the pond, the queen gazed at the water lilies, offering prayers of gratitude. Her eyes were always filled with tears of joy. "Thank you, heavenly spirits, for blessing us with this precious life," she would say while holding the water lily, recalling the warm voice of the fairy and feeling gratitude and joy welling up in her heart. The king devoted himself to ensuring the queen's health. He did everything possible to ensure her comfort and happiness. In the king's love and care, the queen found solace, and their love grew deeper each day. Every night, the king and queen would gaze at the stars, dreaming about the future of their unborn child. "When our child is born, everyone in this kingdom will bless them," the king would say with a warm smile. Finally, the day arrived. The queen gave birth to a beautiful princess. As the baby's cries echoed through the palace, everyone looked at each other with eyes filled with joy. The princess, surprisingly calm for a newborn, exuded a sense of tranquility and peace. Her tiny fingers and toes were as soft and delicate as flower petals. With tears of joy, the king and queen embraced the baby in their arms. The king couldn't take his eyes off the baby. His gaze was filled with deep love and pride. The queen gently caressed the baby's face with a warm smile. "This child is the fruit of our hope," she whispered. The king nodded, saying, "Yes, this child will bring us great joy." The news of the birth of the princess spread rapidly throughout the entire kingdom. From the palace servants to the common people outside, everyone rejoiced upon hearing this joyful news. Streets were filled with festivities as people danced and sang to celebrate the princess's birth. The entire kingdom was filled with joy and blessings. People congratulated each other, commemorating this miraculous day. The king decided to celebrate his daughter's birth with a grand feast. He planned the most splendid and lavish celebration for this special day. Calling upon the finest decorators from across the kingdom, the king adorned both the inside and outside of the palace. The palace gleamed with golden ribbons and silver ornaments, while the gardens bloomed with an array of colorful flowers, as if blessing the occasion with their vibrant hues. Beautiful lights were installed around the pond, illuminating it brightly even at night. To gather the finest ingredients for the feast, the king summoned ambassadors from various countries. Specialty products from each nation were transported to the palace, where chefs prepared exquisite dishes. The king ensured that every detail was meticulously arranged. Alongside the king, the queen watched over the preparations, praying for everything to proceed flawlessly. Furthermore, the king prepared special invitations, crafted with gold embossing, to be sent to important figures from within the kingdom and esteemed guests from abroad. These invitations carried the joy and gratitude of the king and queen. "Please join us in celebrating the birth of our daughter." The king and queen wished for all who received the invitations to share in their joy. The banquet was destined to become the grandest and most lavish celebration in their kingdom. The king and queen spared no effort in preparing everything perfectly for this special day. The palace was adorned with beautiful flowers and sparkling decorations. The gardens bloomed with vibrant colored flowers, and meticulously groomed trees lined up neatly. Delicately carved stones were placed around the pond, while the clear water flowed, creating a magical atmosphere. The main hall where the banquet was held was especially magnificently decorated. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the walls were adorned with gold leaf. Tables were covered with pristine white linen, upon which gleamed ornate silverware and glassware. In the center of each table, lush bouquets of flowers and candelabras further heightened the ambience. The chefs prepared the finest cuisine for this special occasion. The most renowned chefs from across the kingdom gathered to meticulously craft each dish. A variety of exquisite ingredients were used, skillfully prepared to create harmonious flavors. For the main course, There was roast turkey glistening with golden hues, shrimp dishes accompanied by silver sauce, and colorful salads. Desserts included cakes adorned with various fruits and cream, smooth and sweet chocolate delicacies, and fresh fruits. Music and dance were also integral parts of the banquet. The king and queen invited the best musicians to enhance the festive atmosphere. The musicians filled the palace with beautiful melodies, and people danced to the rhythm. The dance unfolded gracefully on the marble floor of the palace, as people held hands and joyfully danced together. However, the most important guests were the 12 fairies from within the kingdom who would bless the princess. Each fairy possessed unique magical powers, capable of bestowing special blessings upon the princess. Invited from different regions, their presence was as mysterious as a tale from legend. These fairies were the most beautiful and mystical beings in the world. Their wings shimmered with a silver glow, and their attire, adorned with various colors and patterns, reflected their personalities and abilities. The first fairy wore a gentle and warm pink dress, with a floral crown adorning her head. The second fairy donned a blue dress associated with wisdom, holding a book of magic in her hands. The third fairy wore a green dress symbolizing harmony with nature, with small leaves adorning the hem. Each fairy exuded elegance and beauty. They had prepared their magic to bless the princess. As the fairies appeared, everyone in the palace was filled with awe and anticipation. One by one, the fairies approached the princess, offering their blessings. The first fairy wished for her to become a person with a warm heart. The second fairy hoped she would become wise and earn the respect of many. The third fairy blessed her to be not only beautiful on the outside, but also within her heart. The king decided to send invitations to each of the fairies. He summoned the finest artisans to prepare these special invitations. The invitations were adorned with edges of pure gold, intricately decorated with patterns and jewels. In the center of each invitation was the seal of the king and queen, surrounded by symbols representing the fairies. Wrapped in luxurious silk, the invitations bore the heartfelt handwritten message from the king and queen. Dear fairy, please join us in celebrating the birth of our daughter. Your blessing will mean the world to our princess. The king and queen took great care to ensure that the fairies receiving the invitations could feel their sincerity. The invitations were delivered by the kingdom's most trusted messengers. These messengers set out toward the fairies' forest. They traversed rugged paths and ventured deep into the woods, where they encountered the fairies. The fairies received the invitations with joy and anticipation. They decided to accept the king and queen's invitation and set off for the palace to bless the princess. However, the queen had one concern. "We only have 12 golden plates to serve the fairies. What should we do?" The queen said to the king with a worried expression. They wanted to give the fairies the best treatment, but the fact that there were 12 fairies made them feel puzzled. Since the fairies were important guests with different magical powers, it was important to treat them equally. The king and queen spent a long time pondering to find a solution. They considered various options, but none seemed satisfactory. The queen worriedly lost sleep over this problem, as she wanted to treat the fairies as best as possible. "My king, do you think there's a good solution for us?" the queen asked the king again. The king gently held the queen's hand and said, "Do not worry, my queen. We will solve this problem together." He gathered the palace servants and wise men to discuss a solution. However, finding a clear solution was not easy. After much deliberation, they made a decision. They would not send an invitation to one of the 12 fairies. Coming to this decision caused much conflict between the king and queen. Each fairy possessed unique abilities, and their blessings would undoubtedly hold great significance for the princess. Not inviting one of them was a significant risk, and they worried about the potential aftermath of such a decision. The queen tossed and turned through the night, unable to sleep due to this issue. She sat by the window, gazing at the moonlight, and let out a deep sigh. "What should we do? Won't not inviting one of the fairies cause her to become angry?" The queen murmured to herself with an uneasy heart. She didn't want to cause discord among the fairies, and she genuinely wished for all of them to bless the princess. The king understood the queen's concerns. To reassure her, he took her hand and spoke warmly, "My dear queen, we have pondered this deeply, and this is the best decision we can make. The fairies will understand our sincerity." Despite trying to have confidence in the decision they reached after much contemplation, the king still harbored lingering doubts in his heart. This decision was an incredibly difficult one. The king and queen worried that it might lead to unfortunate consequences. They feared that the fairy not invited might become angry and bring harm to the princess. However, they saw no other way. They had to accept the reality that there were only 12 golden dishes. Before making this decision, the king and queen discussed it several times and sought advice from the courtiers and wise men of the palace. However, nobody could offer a clear solution. Eventually, the king and queen decided to send a letter of sincere apology to the fairy they chose not to invite. "Respected fairy, we deeply apologize for not inviting you to the feast. This is due to our limitations, and we assure you it is not our intention to disregard your importance." Even after making the decision, the king and queen couldn't shake off their lingering anxiety. They wished all the fairies could come and bless the princess, but realistically, they couldn't invite all 12. They had decided not to invite one fairy after much deliberation, but they couldn't help but worry about the potential consequences of this choice. Despite their concerns, the preparations for the feast had to continue. They knew that this celebration was a significant event to honor the birth of the princess, so they put their best efforts into the preparations. The preparations for the feast were in full swing. Every corner of the palace was bustling with activity. The decoration team cleaned the marble walls and floors, hanging cloths adorned with gold and silver. The palace ceiling was adorned with fantastic lighting that resembled celestial stars, while vibrant tapestries adorned the walls. Each room was filled with fresh flowers, spreading fragrant scents throughout. In the king and queen's chamber, the most beautiful bouquet of roses was placed, while the banquet hall was adorned with giant floral decorations. The garden was particularly beautifully decorated, with flowers of vibrant colors blooming as if a rainbow had descended upon the earth. The trees in the garden were adorned with various colored lanterns, amidst which a variety of flowers bloomed. Crystal-decorated lights were installed around the pond, shining brightly even at night. The water in the pond was clear and clean, creating a fantastic scene with the reflected flowers and lights. Small fountains around the pond added to the mystical atmosphere. In the banquet hall, musicians practiced beautiful melodies, enhancing the atmosphere of the feast. The sound of instruments echoed throughout the palace, signaling the beginning of the celebration. The stage was specially decorated and prepared for the fairies to deliver their blessings. The king and queen watched over all these preparations with satisfied smiles. The most exceptional chefs from across the country spared no effort in preparing the food. Specially selected chefs for this feast meticulously prepared each ingredient and devoted themselves entirely to creating the finest dishes. In the kitchen, fresh ingredients were ready, and the aroma of various spices and herbs filled the air. Each chef showcased their skills to create delicious and beautiful dishes. As the main course, a golden roasted turkey was prepared. The turkey was slowly roasted, resulting in a crispy exterior and a tender interior. It was accompanied by a silver sauce, with a variety of colorful vegetables arranged alongside. The aroma of the turkey spread throughout the palace, tantalizing the taste buds of the guests. Another main dish was shrimp with a silver sauce. The fresh shrimp were lightly cooked, maintaining their natural flavor while harmonizing perfectly with the rich sauce. For dessert, a cake topped with various fruits and cream was prepared. The cake was soft and moist, with fresh fruits beautifully decorating the top. Additionally, there were soft and sweet chocolate desserts served alongside fresh fruits. In the kitchen, All the dishes were prepared with precision, and beautiful silverware was used for serving. The chefs gave their best until the end, hoping for the success of the feast. The celebration to congratulate the princess's birth was grandly held. The palace was fantastically adorned for the feast. The marble floor sparkled, and colorful tapestries adorned the walls. Every corner of the palace was perfectly prepared for the feast. The garden was filled with various flowers, and beautiful lanterns were installed, shining brightly even at night. Crystal-adorned lights were installed around the pond, creating a dazzling and fantastical scene with the shimmering waves. The banquet hall was especially splendid. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the walls were decorated with gold leaf. The tables were covered with pristine linen, adorned with dazzling silverware and glassware. A lavish bouquet of flowers and candlesticks adorned the center of each table, further enhancing the atmosphere. When all preparations were complete, the palace looked as beautiful as a world from a fairy tale. As the feast began, musicians uplifted the mood with beautiful melodies. They showcased magnificent performances with various instruments such as violin, harp, and flute. The music echoed throughout the palace, and guests began to dance to the rhythm. Dance and song continued on stage, delighting the audience. The palace and its surroundings were filled with a festive atmosphere, and everyone rejoiced and enjoyed this joyful day. The king and queen, holding the princess in their arms, shared their joy at the center of the celebration. The queen smiled warmly at the princess, while the king looked at her with proud eyes. Guests congratulated the king and queen, blessing the princess's birth. Everyone celebrated the princess's birth and spent a happy time. Laughter and cheers filled the palace. Joy overflowed on everyone's faces. Invited guests enjoyed delicious food at their respective tables, exchanging congratulatory greetings. The palace was filled with joy and happiness. The king and queen proudly welcomed guests, celebrating the princess. Guests were dressed in splendid attire, shining even brighter against the palace's extravagant decorations. The marble floor of the banquet hall sparkled, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Tapestries adorned the walls with gold leaf decorations, while tables were covered in pristine linen. Dazzling silverware and glassware adorned the tables, with lavish bouquets of flowers and candlesticks in the center, further enhancing the ambience. The entire palace was filled with light and color. Musicians uplifted the mood with beautiful melodies. Various instruments, such as violin, harp, and flute, harmonized to present magnificent performances. They played their best to ensure guests had a delightful time. The music echoed throughout the palace, and people started dancing to the rhythm. Dance and song continued on stage, delighting everyone. The fairies stepped forward, one by one, to bless the princess. The first fairy wished for the princess to have a warm heart. She gently laid her hand on the princess's and spoke softly, "Princess, may your heart always be warm and gentle. Your warm heart will bring hope and joy to many people." Smiling, the princess nodded in acknowledgement of the fairy's blessing. The first fairy blessed the princess, hoping she would become a person with a warm heart. She gently laid her hand on the princess's and spoke softly, "Princess, may your heart always be warm and gentle. Your warm heart will bring hope and joy to many people." The fairy's touch was warm and gentle like a spring breeze. Where her hand touched, a soft light spread, penetrating deep into the princess's heart. Feeling the warmth of the fairy's blessing, the princess smiled gratefully, sending a thankful glance to the fairy. The fairy's blessing was not just mere words, it was a power that nestled into the princess's heart like magic, allowing her to spread warmth to many people as she grew. After bestowing her blessing upon the princess, the first fairy gently stroked the princess's head and sent her a sincere smile. "Princess, your warm heart will brighten this kingdom." The fairy's words illuminated the princess's future like a prophecy. The second fairy wished for the princess to become a wise person, earning the respect of many. Approaching the princess, she took her hand and spoke, "Princess, may your wisdom always shine. Your wisdom will illuminate this kingdom and be of great help to many." The fairy's touch was warm and gentle, and her eyes held deep wisdom and compassion. As the princess held the fairy's hand, she felt the warmth and wisdom enveloping her. With closed eyes, the fairy quietly recited a spell to impart the power of wisdom to the princess. A soft light flowed from her hand, wrapping around the princess's hand and seeping deep into her heart. The light felt as though it was awakening the princess's soul. "Princess, your wisdom will illuminate this kingdom and be a light to many." The fairy's words felt like a divine calling to the princess. Gratefully, the princess received the fairy's blessing with a smile of gratitude. The third fairy blessed the princess to become a person of beauty not only in appearance but also in heart. Approaching the princess, she gently touched her face with a soft hand and spoke, "Princess, may both your inner and outer beauty be loved by many. Your beauty will illuminate this kingdom and bring joy to many." The fairy's touch was as soft and warm as flower petals. From her fingertips, a gentle light flowed, enveloping the princess's face and seeping deeply into her heart. The light brought inner peace and joy to the princess along with her beauty. With a happy smile, the princess received the fairy's blessing. At the touch of the fairy's hand, the princess's skin seemed to glow even brighter, and her eyes became clearer. The light seemed to illuminate both the princess's inner and outer beauty simultaneously. The fairy placed her hand on the princess's and whispered softly, "Princess, your beauty will shine brighter in this world. Because your heart is beautiful, that beauty will also manifest outwardly." The fairy's voice was as gentle and serene as music. Touched deeply by the warm words, the princess received the fairy's blessing with profound gratitude. As the fairy stepped away from the princess, everyone in the palace admired the princess's dazzling beauty. Her beauty surpassed mere appearance, emanating from the depths of her heart. Everyone was captivated by the princess's beauty, feeling that her presence added light to the world. So, the fairies approached one by one, each imparting their blessings upon the princess. The fourth fairy blessed the princess to become a courageous person. She approached the princess, extending her hand while speaking with a warm voice, "Princess, may your courage be a source of strength for many." Warm energy flowed from her touch, igniting the flames of courage deep within the princess's heart. With newfound confidence, the princess felt she could face life ahead without fear. The fifth fairy blessed the princess to become a beloved person. "Princess, may your loveliness bring joy to many." She approached the princess, smiling softly as she held her hand. In that moment, a warm aura of love spread throughout the princess's heart. She realized she could be loved by many and share that love with others. The sixth fairy blessed the princess to become a healthy person. "Princess, may your health always be maintained." She approached the princess, gently placing her hand on her forehead. From deep within, a surge of vitality emanated throughout the princess's body. She knew she could always live healthily and vibrantly. The seventh fairy blessed the princess to lead a happy life. "Princess, may your life always be filled with happiness." Approaching the princess, she took her hand and smiled. In that moment, a wave of happiness washed over the princess's heart. She felt she could live a life full of joy and contentment. The eighth fairy blessed the princess to become a wise person. "Princess, may your wisdom benefit many." Approaching her, she looked into the princess's eyes with wisdom, holding her hand. From deep within, a surge of wisdom spread throughout the princess's being. She knew she could always make wise and thoughtful decisions. The ninth fairy blessed the princess to love peace. "Princess, may your peaceful heart bring peace to many." Approaching her, she reached out her hand with a gentle voice. In that moment, a sense of peace emanated from the princess's heart. She knew she could always live a life of tranquility and harmony. The 10th fairy blessed the princess to be generous. "Princess, may your generosity inspire courage in many." Approaching her, she smiled gently while holding her hand. In that moment, a sense of generosity spread from the princess's heart. She knew she could always treat people with kindness and generosity. The 11th fairy blessed the princess to become a wise leader. "Princess, may your wisdom and leadership illuminate this kingdom." Approaching her, she took her hand and spoke with warmth. From deep within, a surge of leadership spread throughout the princess's being. She knew she could always lead the kingdom with wisdom and grace. The 12th fairy blessed the princess to be loved and respected by all. "Princess, may your love and respect bring peace to this kingdom." Approaching her, she took her hand and smiled warmly. In that moment, a sense of love and respect spread from the princess's heart. She knew she could always be loved and respected by many. As the 12th fairy finished blessing the princess and began to withdraw, suddenly a fierce wind engulfed the palace. Doors slammed shut, and the sound of windows rattling could be heard. Everyone looked around in alarm. The wind seemed to intensify, as if trying to disrupt the fairies' blessings, causing the palace's candles to flicker and sway. The fairies looked at each other in confusion, and the people inside the palace glanced around with uneasy expressions. Then, with another loud noise, the door swung open once more, revealing the uninvited 13th fairy. Her appearance was strikingly different from the others. She was dressed in black, and a chill emanated from her eyes. As soon as she appeared, the atmosphere in the palace darkened abruptly. As the 12th fairy was about to bestow her blessing, suddenly a fierce wind engulfed the palace. Doors slammed shut, and windows rattled and shook. Startled, everyone looked around. The wind seemed to grow stronger, as if trying to disrupt the fairies' blessings, causing the palace's candles to flicker and flicker. Then, with a loud noise, the door swung open again, and the uninvited 13th fairy appeared. Her appearance was markedly different from the other fairies. She wore a long black dress, and a black veil covered her head. A chill emanated from her gaze, and her eyes sparkled coldly like ice gleaming in the darkness. As she appeared, the atmosphere in the palace grew abruptly darker. The wind continued to gust behind her, and her black dress billowed like wings of darkness. Upon the arrival of the 13th fairy, everyone was seized with astonishment and fear. Her cold gaze seemed to freeze the hearts of all present. The king and queen looked at her with bewildered expressions, and even the other fairies could not hide their surprise at her arrival. At that moment, the uninvited 13th fairy made her appearance. She stood out starkly from the other fairies. Clad in a black dress, she wore a long black veil that obscured her face. A chilling aura emanated from her gaze, and her eyes were cold and sharp like ice. As she materialized, the atmosphere within the palace grew ominously dark. The wind continued to gust behind her, causing her black dress to billow like the wings of darkness. Upon her arrival, everyone in the palace was seized with astonishment and fear. The king and queen looked at her with bewildered expressions. Even the other fairies could not conceal their surprise at her presence. Her cold gaze seemed to freeze the hearts of all present, much like ice enveloping them in its grip. Her gaze exuded a chilling aura, and her cold stare seemed to freeze the hearts of all who beheld it, much like ice enveloping them. Clad in a long black dress, her head veiled in black, she emanated an icy gleam from her eyes, and the energy emanating from them seemed to freeze the surrounding air. As she materialized, the atmosphere within the palace grew ominously dark. The wind continued to gust behind her, causing her black dress to billow like the wings of darkness. With each slow step forward, her footfalls echoed like the sound of ice shattering, cold and sharp. The people within the palace trembled at the sound. The 13th fairy's cold gaze turned toward the king and queen. A sardonic smile played at her lips. She spoke in a chilling tone, "So, I was not invited. Did you think you could do without me?" Her voice, like the sound of breaking ice, was icy and sharp. Slowly, she approached the king and queen, continuing her words. "I cannot simply overlook your rudeness. The 13th fairy advanced slowly, her steps heavy and chilling. With each stride, the air grew colder, as if the temperature around her was dropping like ice. Her dress brushed against the floor lightly, its sound resembling whispers of death. Her gaze remained icy, a sardonic smile playing at her lips. Her eyes were as cold as ice, seeming to penetrate everything. She approached the king and queen, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disdain. "I cannot simply overlook your rudeness," she spoke, her voice as cold and sharp as the sound of breaking ice. Drawing nearer to the king and queen, she continued, "There will be consequences for not inviting me." Her voice grew stronger, echoing like thunder within the palace. The king and queen looked at the 13th fairy with a mixture of astonishment and concern. The king's face grew pale, while the queen gripped her hands tightly, trembling with anxiety. With a shaky voice, the king pleaded, "Please, do not curse our daughter. Please forgive our mistake." His voice was filled with sincere appeal. Tearfully, the queen implored the 13th fairy, "Please, forgive our daughter. She has done nothing wrong." Her voice quivered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The 13th fairy responded with a sardonic smile, "I will not accept your apology." Her voice was as cold and merciless as ice. "The invitation I did not receive has trampled upon my dignity, and your princess will pay the price for it." Her words echoed through the palace like a curse. Her gaze remained icy, devoid of any sympathy. The 12 fairies who had approached to bless the princess couldn't hide their astonishment either. They were taken aback by the appearance of the 13th fairy and shocked by her words. The first fairy approached cautiously and said, "Please, forgive our mistake. The princess has done nothing wrong. Please, do not harm her." Her voice was filled with earnestness and sincerity. The fairies averted their gaze from the 13th fairy's cold stare. Her mere presence seemed to freeze the air around them. With a sardonic smile, the 13th fairy replied, "It's already too late. The princess will pay the price." Her voice remained icy, devoid of any sympathy. The other fairies, too, were rendered speechless by shock and fear. They stood frozen in their places, unable to utter a word. As the uninvited fairy began to address the princess, everyone held their breath, watching intently. The 13th fairy raised her hand and began to chant a spell. Dark energy emanated from her fingertips, directed towards the princess. Her gestures were powerful and ominous, resembling the casting of dark magic. The magical energy extended slowly towards the princess, enveloping her in fear. The dark light emanating from the fairy's hand intensified as it approached the princess, wrapping around her like a cloud of darkness, as if attempting to pull her into the realm of shadows. Everyone in the palace watched in silence, unable to intervene or protect the princess. On the day the princess turns 15, she shall prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. The voice of the 13th fairy echoed through the palace like a chilling wind, carrying a cold and merciless foreboding of death. Shock and fear immobilized everyone. No one could speak. The princess paled at the words, while the king and queen held her close, tears streaming down their faces. The curse wielded by the fairy held a powerful force that obstructed the princess's fate. Her voice was as cold and sharp as ice, and each word she uttered froze the hearts of everyone in the palace. It wasn't merely a curse, it was a dreadful magic that determined the princess's destiny. On the day the princess turned 15, the curse of the 13th fairy, foretelling her death by pricking her finger on a spinning wheel, echoed throughout the palace. Her voice engraved itself deeply into the hearts of the people, as if the curse had become a grim reality. Cold and merciless, her words instilled fear in everyone, plunging the palace into a momentary stillness, the heavy air seeming to freeze time itself. The fairy's curse was not mere words. The dark light emanating from her fingertips enveloped the princess, embedding the curse deeply within her. The princess's eyes filled with terror, her face pale. Trembling, she called out to her parents, her voice barely audible, like a faint whisper. "Mother, father, please help me." The king and queen were consumed by despair, tears streaming from their eyes. The king held his daughter tightly, his voice trembling as he spoke. "This shall never come to pass. I will do everything in my power to protect you." Yet, his voice betrayed an underlying sense of unease and fear. The queen clasped the princess's hand tightly, tears flowing freely. "We must find a way to break this curse, no matter what." Her voice reverberated coldly throughout the palace, echoing like the sound of shattering ice, filling every corner with a chilling terror. The 13th fairy gazed at the princess and pronounced her curse. Her eyes were merciless and cruel. With each word she uttered, the entire palace was ensnared in a cold fear. "On the day the princess turns 15, she shall prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die." Her voice was icy, and its resonance shook the entire palace. The king and queen fell into despair, while the princess trembled in fear, seeking refuge in her parents' embrace. The queen held her tightly, tears streaming down her face, uncontrollable and stemming from the deepest recesses of her heart. The fairies were filled with fear and confusion at her words. The first fairy, once again summoning her courage, approached the 13th fairy. "Please, forgive our mistake. The princess has done no wrong. Please do not bring harm upon her." Her voice was earnest and sincere. However, the 13th fairy responded with a scornful smile. "It's too late. The princess shall pay the price." Her voice remained cold, devoid of any sympathy in her eyes. "On the day the princess turns 15, she shall prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die." Once again, the 13th fairy's voice reverberated throughout the palace. It echoed like an ominous harbinger of death, sending chills down everyone's spine. Shock and fear paralyzed them, rendering them speechless. The princess paled upon hearing those words, while the king and queen held her tightly, tears streaming down their faces. The 13th fairy declared her terrifying curse as if it were a command, enveloping the palace in a chilling gust of her voice, sharp and ruthless like the sound of shattering ice. Trembling, the princess clung to her parents, her eyes filled with fear and dread. The curse wielded by the fairy was a powerful magic that determined the princess's fate. Her words were not merely a warning, but a curse that plunged the princess's future into darkness. The princess's face grew pale, her hands trembling. The king and queen held her close, consumed by despair and fear, feeling an urgent need to somehow thwart this dreadful curse. The queen was unable to find words after such a terrifying curse was cast. Tears streamed down her face, expressing her profound despair. Alongside her deep love for her daughter, she harbored a strong desire to protect the princess from this dreadful curse. Her hand tightly grasped the princess's, her eyes filled with profound sadness and despair. Gently holding the princess's hand, the queen looked into her daughter's eyes. "We must find a way to stop this curse. I cannot bear to lose you." Her voice trembled, tears continuously flowing down her cheeks. Despite the despair and fear in her heart, she was filled with determination to protect her daughter. Embracing the princess tenderly, she kissed her on the forehead. The king, too, was immersed in deep sorrow and despair. He was determined to do whatever it takes to protect his daughter. "We must stop this curse, no matter the cost." His voice was resolute. Gathering his servants, he pondered ways to thwart the curse. "There must be a way to stop this curse. We will never give up." His voice was firm, his eyes shining with strong determination. The queen could only shed tears, unsure of what to do. Her tears poured like rain, reflecting the deep despair within her heart. Her hand trembled, her voice barely able to suppress the trembling as she whispered to her daughter, "We will protect you, no matter what happens." Though her voice was quiet, it carried strong determination and love within. The queen kissed the princess on the forehead, wiping away her tears. The king tightly held the princess's hand and commanded his servants, "We will do whatever it takes to stop this curse. Gather all the spinning wheels in the kingdom and burn them. Not a single spinning wheel should be left." His voice was firm and resolute. The servants immediately moved to obey his command. The queen, driven by her deep love for her daughter, was determined to protect the princess from this dreadful curse by any means necessary. Holding the princess tightly, she sought to alleviate her daughter's anxiety and fear with her warm embrace. Though her hands trembled, they held strong determination and resolve. Gently stroking her daughter's face, she wiped away her tears. Quietly, the queen whispered, "We will keep you safe. No matter what happens, we will protect you." Though her voice trembled, it carried strong determination. Planting a kiss on the princess's forehead, she continued her comforting words. "You will be safe. We will find a way to stop this curse." Looking into the queen's eyes with her tear-stained face, the princess felt a sense of comfort in her mother's warm touch. Holding her daughter's small hand, the queen was prepared to sacrifice everything for her. Her heart was filled with a strong determination and love to protect her daughter. Observing his daughter and wife, the king, too, resolved to do whatever it took to protect his daughter. He commanded his servants, "We must stop this curse. Gather all the spinning wheels in the kingdom and burn them. Not a single spinning wheel should be left." His voice was firm, and his eyes were filled with determination. Upon hearing about this dreadful curse, both the king, the queen, and all the servants were plunged into deep shock and fear. They could hardly believe that the princess's future had been prophesied in such a horrifying manner. The palace was filled with sadness and fear. Servants exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions reflecting their anxiety. "We must find a way to stop this curse," one servant said with desperation in their voice. The king, his face pale with determination to change the princess's fate, resolved to do whatever it took. With a resolute voice, he commanded his servants, "Gather all the spinning wheels in the kingdom and burn them. Not a single spinning wheel should be left. We must do everything in our power to stop this curse." His voice was firm, and his eyes glinted with unwavering resolve. The servants immediately set about following his orders with urgency. The king and queen couldn't believe that the princess's future had been prophesied in such a horrifying manner. They were engulfed in despair and fear, their hearts heavy with sorrow. The queen held the princess tightly, tears streaming down her face. "How could such a thing happen?" she said with a trembling voice. Her hands shook, and tears flowed endlessly. Yet, within the queen's heart, there was a strong determination and resolve to protect her daughter. The king, his face pale with determination to change the princess's fate, resolved to do whatever it took. With a resolute voice, he commanded his servants, "Gather all the spinning wheels in the kingdom and burn them. Not a single spinning wheel should be left. We must do everything in our power to stop this curse." His voice was firm, and his eyes glinted with unwavering resolve. The servants immediately set about following his orders with urgency. Servants gathered spinning wheels from all corners of the kingdom and brought them to the courtyard of the castle. Carriages and wagons filled with spinning wheels piled up in the courtyard, the quantity growing by the minute. From atop the castle walls, the king looked down at this sight and sighed deeply. His heart was filled with determination to do whatever it took to protect his daughter. He fervently hoped that burning all the spinning wheels would avert the curse. At that moment, the 12th fairy stepped forward quietly. Her steps were light, and a gentle light surrounded her. She looked at the king and queen with a serene and calm expression. Deep mercy and compassion filled her eyes. The fairy's presence illuminated the palace like warm sunlight. She was beautiful and elegant. Her dress shimmered subtly, and her hair was adorned with elaborate floral decorations. As she approached, everyone in the palace looked at her with reverence. Her smile seemed like a ray of hope. She gently smiled and approached the queen. "My dear queen, please do not be too sad," she said in a gentle voice. Her voice enveloped the palace like a warm breeze, calming everyone's hearts. Her eyes were warm and compassionate, and each word she spoke carried deep comfort. "Queen, please don't be too sad. My blessing is still here." The 12th fairy spoke with a warm smile. Her presence illuminated the palace like a shining star, and her voice resonated like gentle music. Her silvery hair sparkled, and her eyes were filled with deep mercy and compassion. Her dress shimmered softly, wrapping the air with gentleness. Her touch felt like a warm spring breeze, spreading hope and tranquility in everyone's hearts with each word she uttered. "Even if the princess is pricked by the spindle, she will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep with the castle for 100 years." Her voice was as gentle and tranquil as a lullaby. Wiping away her tears, the queen asked, "Is it true? Our daughter won't die but fall into a deep sleep?" Her voice carried earnest hope and reassurance. The 12th fairy nodded affectionately, her gaze warm and compassionate. "Yes, Queen. The princess will fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. But she will be safe and eventually awaken." Her words brought great comfort to everyone in the palace. The queen expressed deep gratitude to the 12th fairy. "Thank you so much for protecting the princess." Her voice still trembled, but it held immense relief. The fairy gently held the queen's hand, enveloping it with warmth. "Now, find peace, queen. The princess will be safe. Everyone here knows that you all strive to love and protect her. Your love and dedication will be a great strength for her." Upon hearing these words, the king and queen breathed a sigh of relief, if only for a moment. Although they couldn't completely stop the curse of the 13th fairy, the hope emerged that, thanks to the blessing of the 12th fairy, the princess wouldn't die but fall into a deep sleep. The queen expressed deep gratitude to the 12th fairy. "Thank you so much for protecting the princess." Her voice was filled with sincere gratitude. Tears still lingered in the queen's eyes, but within them shone a new light of hope. She took the 12th fairy's hand and earnestly spoke, "Thank you so much. Without your blessing, we wouldn't have known what to do." Her voice trembled, but it carried deep emotion and gratitude. The 12th fairy gently enveloped the queen's hand with a tender smile. "Don't worry, queen. The princess will be safe. Your love and dedication will be a great strength for her." Her voice wrapped around the palace like a warm breeze, comforting everyone's hearts. She placed her hand on the princess's head one last time and whispered a blessing. The 12th fairy's blessing, that the princess wouldn't die but fall into a deep sleep, brought great comfort to everyone. People in the palace did their best in their respective roles to protect the princess. They believed in the 12th fairy's blessing and hoped for the princess's safe upbringing. Thanks to the blessings of the 12 fairies, the princess grew up with a warm heart, wisdom, and beauty. Blessed by the fairies, the princess possessed extraordinary abilities and virtues. Growing up in the palace, she learned various arts and sciences, showed kindness to everyone, and received people's love. She could solve difficult problems with wisdom, seeming to possess a mysterious power. The princess's beauty became renowned far and wide. Her skin was as fair as snow, her hair shone like gold, and her eyes were clear and blue. Every day, the princess grew up peacefully in the palace. She spent her time cultivating flowers in the garden and conversing with birds. Her laughter rang out like bells, filling everyone in the palace with joy. She was close to everyone in the palace, her heart always warm and compassionate. However, the king's mind was still unsettled. He was deeply worried and saddened by the thought that his daughter, though not dead, would be asleep for 100 years. Constant anxiety and fear had taken root in his heart. From atop the castle walls, he looked down at the accumulating spinning wheels. He resolved to take further measures to protect his daughter. Worry and fatigue filled the king's eyes. He pondered day and night for the safety of the princess, exhausting all possible means to ensure she wouldn't fall victim to the curse. He summoned scholars and wizards to find a solution, yet no method proved to be a perfect remedy. Nevertheless, he did not give up. We must eliminate all the spinning wheels. Every spindle must be thoroughly searched for and burned to ensure the princess does not prick her finger on a spindle. The king's voice was firm, his determination unwavering. He was prepared to endure any sacrifice to protect his daughter. Love and resolve shone in his eyes. Upon receiving the king's command, his servants immediately sprang into action. So the king made the decision to eradicate all the spinning wheels in the kingdom. He commanded his servants, "Gather all the spinning wheels in the kingdom and burn them. Not a single spindle should be left." His voice was firm, his resolve unwavering. The servants immediately set to work to follow his orders. The courtyard of the palace quickly filled with spinning wheels. Carriages and carts continuously arrived at the castle, and spinning wheels gathered from all around piled up like mountains. Farmers brought old spinning wheels, and artisans willingly surrendered their own. Some tearfully handed over spinning wheels that had been part of their family's livelihood for generations. Nevertheless, fueled by the determination to protect the princess, they all brought the spinning wheels to the castle. From atop the castle walls, the king looked down at this scene and sighed deeply. Though his eyes were filled with weariness and worry, his resolve to do whatever it took to protect his daughter only strengthened. He fervently hoped that burning all the spinning wheels would avert the curse. "We must protect the princess, whatever the sacrifice." His voice carried strong determination and love. According to this command, spinning wheels were gathered from across the kingdom, and the task of burning them in a large fire was carried out. The flames seemed to surge as if to burn away that sadness and despair. Spinning wheels gathered in the courtyard were thrown one by one into the flames, and towering flames shot up into the sky. The blaze fiercely burned, as if intent on consuming the curse. Servants went from village to city, collecting spinning wheels. People surrendered their cherished spinning wheels, praying for the princess's safety. As old spinning wheels piled up in the courtyard, people's hearts were filled with love and wishes for the princess. Farmers and artisans shed tears as they cast their long-used tools and creations into the fire. Nevertheless, fueled by the determination to protect the princess, they all brought the spinning wheels to the castle. The spinning wheels piled in the courtyard looked like giant mountains. Watching this scene from atop the castle walls, the king sighed deeply. Though his eyes were filled with weariness and worry, his resolve to do whatever it took to protect his daughter only strengthened. He fervently hoped that burning all the spinning wheels would avert the curse. "We must protect the princess, whatever the sacrifice." His voice carried strong determination and love. Servants threw spinning wheels, one by one, into the flames. The fire grew taller, its light reaching far beyond the castle walls. The king and queen, watching the blaze from atop the walls, held each other's hands tightly, their hearts filled with deep relief and sadness intertwining. They felt reassured by the fact that they were doing everything they could for the princess. As the flames surged, everyone in the palace made a firm resolve to protect the princess. They prayed earnestly for all the spinning wheels to burn away completely, for the curse to vanish entirely. Watching the burning spinning wheels beside her parents, the princess felt the love and dedication directed towards her. Realizing that she was growing up surrounded by the love and protection of many people warmed her heart. The king and queen held each other's hands tightly as they gazed at the flames, solidifying their determination for the princess's sake. They felt reassured by the fact that they were doing everything they could to stop the curse. As the fire burned, they vowed to make every effort to ensure the princess's safe upbringing. Their hearts were filled with a strong determination to protect their daughter. Taking her parents' hands, the princess spoke softly, "Mother, Father, thank you for protecting me like this. I feel so happy growing up with your love." Her voice was gentle and warm. Tears of gratitude welled up in her eyes. The queen hugged her daughter tightly, saying, "We will do whatever it takes to protect you. You are our precious daughter." Her voice was filled with sincerity. As every spinning wheel burned, everyone in the palace made a firm resolve to protect the princess. The flames in the courtyard surged towards the sky like the breath of a mighty dragon, illuminating the darkness and spreading far and wide. The sound of the fire roaring echoed like crashing waves, and its light was as intense as the sun. People gathered around the palace courtyard, gazing at the flames, each silently praying for the princess's safety. Tears welled up in the eyes of some as they watched the blaze, while others joined hands in prayer, comforting each other with embraces, their faces filled with earnestness and hope. They were all united in their determination to ensure the princess's safety. From atop the castle walls, the king and queen watched the burning spinning wheels with deep emotion and sorrow. While feeling reassured by the fact that they were doing everything they could for their daughter, they still harbored anxiety about whether they could completely eradicate the curse. Holding each other's hands tightly, they reaffirmed their commitment to the princess. The princess watched the blazing fire beside her parents, deeply moved by how many people were striving for her sake. Holding her parents' hands, she spoke softly, "Mother, Father, thank you for protecting me like this. I feel so happy growing up with your love." Her voice was gentle and warm, tears of gratitude filling her eyes. The queen hugged her daughter tightly, saying, "We will do whatever it takes to protect you. You are our precious daughter." Her voice was filled with sincerity. The king, too, held his daughter's hand and nodded, "You are the most precious being to us. We will do anything for you." As the flames died down and all the spinning wheels were consumed, the castle fell silent once more. Only ashes remained in the courtyard, giving the impression that the curse had been lifted. The bricks of the castle walls still retained warmth from the fire, and the air was filled with the scent of burnt wood and metal. The king, queen, and their attendants sighed with relief. Believing they had done everything they could to protect the princess, they felt a deep sense of reassurance within their hearts. From atop the castle walls, the king and queen looked at the ashes of the burnt spinning wheels, expressing gratitude to all who had devoted themselves to their daughter. With tears in her eyes, the queen said, "Now, all we can do is hope that the curse has been lifted. We truly gave it our all." The king took her hand and nodded, "Yes, now we must hold on to hope." The princess gazed at the remaining ashes in the courtyard, deeply appreciating the efforts of everyone who had worked to protect her. She realized that she had grown up in the love and dedication of many people. Expressing profound gratitude to her parents and attendants, she said, "Thank you for protecting me. Because of your love, I know I can grow up safely." Her voice was gentle and warm, carrying deep emotion within. As time passed, the princess grew more beautiful and wise. Thanks to the blessings of the fairies, she became a person with a warm and compassionate heart, always ready to show kindness to everyone. Her beauty and wisdom became known far and wide, and many people admired and loved her. The princess maintained close relationships with all the people of the kingdom, sharing warm smiles and kindness with them. She learned various arts and sciences, sharing wisdom and love with people inside and outside the palace. She played with children in the palace gardens, nurturing flowers and trees. Her laughter was as clear and beautiful as the sound of bells, bringing joy to everyone in the palace. The princess formed precious relationships with people and received their love. Her beauty shone brighter day by day, and her wisdom was respected by all. She dined with people at grand banquets in the palace hall, engaging in wise conversations with them. Her words were always warm and thoughtful, and her smile was a great comfort to everyone. The princess grew up happily, cherished by people's love. Additionally, the princess showed remarkable talent in arts and music. She sang with a beautiful voice, gathering many people to listen to her songs. She played the piano and harp skillfully, her performances touching people's hearts like an angel's touch. Her artistic talent brought great joy to people, and her music brought happiness to the entire kingdom. As the princess's 15th birthday approached, the king and queen found themselves deeply worried once again. Despite their efforts to avoid the curse, the weight of the curse of the 15th fairy still lingered heavily in their hearts. Determined to protect the princess, they decided to take further measures. They thoroughly monitored all entrances and exits of the palace to ensure the princess could safely celebrate her 15th birthday. The king commanded his servants, "Prepare everything meticulously so that the princess can celebrate her 15th birthday safely. Spare no effort to eliminate any danger." His voice carried strong determination and love. The servants heeded the king's command and strengthened the palace's security. Guards patrolled the palace day and night, meticulously checking for any potential threats. While an uneasy atmosphere surrounded the palace, preparations for the princess's birthday celebration were also in full swing. The gardens were adorned with beautiful flowers, and the banquet hall was lavishly decorated. The palace servants were busy preparing delicious food and drinks. The king and queen believed that their determination would protect the princess, so they spared no effort in making all the preparations. To protect the princess, the king and queen securely locked all the doors and windows of the palace. Guards patrolled the palace day and night, striving to detect any potential threats. They inspected not only the outer walls of the palace, but also the inner corridors, stairs, and hidden rooms. Armed guards were stationed at every entrance of the palace, reinforcing their guard stance to prevent any potential intruders. Inside the palace, servants and attendants closely monitored the area around the princess's room. They remained vigilant to ensure the princess never disappeared from their sight, sparing no effort to guarantee her safety. Considering all possibilities, the king and queen prepared for any unforeseen accidents. They firmly locked the door of the princess's room and installed thick iron bars on the windows to eliminate any risks. The corridors of the palace were silent, filled with tension. Servants moved quietly, suppressing the sound of their footsteps, while guards scanned their surroundings with sharp eyes. Everyone earnestly prayed for the princess's safety and did their utmost to ensure she could evade the curse. As the princess's 15th birthday approached, tension filled the palace inside and out. The princess expressed deep gratitude to her parents and servants for their efforts, thanking everyone who worked tirelessly for her sake. Once again, she realized she had grown up in the love and protection of many people. Spending time with her parents, she felt their love and dedication. Feeling a sense of relief in her parents' embrace, the princess said, "Mother, Father, thank you so much for protecting me like this. I feel truly happy growing up in your love." Her voice was gentle and warm, tears of emotion welled up in her eyes. The queen hugged her daughter tightly, saying, "We will do whatever it takes to protect you. You are our precious daughter." Her voice was filled with sincerity. Inside the heavily guarded palace, everyone was preparing to celebrate the princess's birthday amidst the tension. The king and queen, along with their attendants, prepared a grand banquet to welcome the princess's 15th birthday. They made thorough plans to ensure the princess's safety during the celebration. The banquet hall was beautifully decorated, and various foods and gifts were prepared. The grand banquet hall of the palace was adorned with extravagant chandeliers and flower arrangements. Flags with the royal insignia were hung on the walls, and the floor was covered with red carpets. In the center of the banquet hall, a long table was set, adorned with exquisite silverware and golden plates. The table was filled with delicious foods, and fruits and desserts were beautifully arranged. Musicians were playing beautiful melodies in one corner, filling the banquet hall with music and bringing joy to the guests. People laughed and chatted, enjoying themselves in their seats. The princess herself was filled with joy and anticipation as she celebrated her birthday. She was touched by the love of her parents and attendants as she observed the preparations made for her. As the princess entered the banquet hall, all eyes were on her. She greeted people with a bright smile, her appearance resembling a shining star. Her golden hair shimmered softly, and her blue eyes radiated deep wisdom and warmth. Her dress was dazzlingly beautiful, and her graceful steps captivated everyone. She exchanged warm smiles and greetings with the people. As the birthday banquet began, the palace was filled with joy and celebration. Music filled the air, and people danced, enjoying the festive atmosphere. The princess, accompanied by her parents, moved around the banquet hall, greeting the guests. Her smile brought great joy to everyone, and her warm words touched the hearts of the people. The banquet hall was luxurious and splendid. Golden silk curtains adorned the walls, while crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling. Various foods were beautifully arranged on the tables. Fine wines were poured into golden goblets, and fresh fruits and meticulously prepared dishes were placed on silver plates. People laughed, talked, and immersed themselves in the festive atmosphere. The king and queen proudly watched their daughter from her side. They felt immense joy and pride in seeing how beautifully and wisely she had grown. The princess exchanged greetings with each guest, receiving their blessings. Her beauty captivated all who beheld her, and her warm heart melted the hearts of the people. The king delivered a speech in the banquet hall, asking everyone to bless the princess. Today is our princess's 15th birthday. We have made great efforts to ensure her safety, and with your help, we have reached this day. We sincerely hope that our princess will continue to live happily and safely. The king's voice was warm and sincere, filled with genuine care. People agreed with the king's words and applauded, sending their blessings to the princess. As soon as the princess left her seat, she was drawn by curiosity towards the old tower of the palace. It was a rarely used place, filled with dust and cobwebs. Nevertheless, the princess moved her steps as if drawn by something. She ascended the dark and narrow stairs to the top of the tower. The stairs were made of wood, creaking with each step she took. Occasionally, she brushed off the dust and grasped the wall with her hand as she climbed. Upon reaching the top of the tower, she discovered a strange room. In the room, there was an old spinning wheel. It was a beautiful spinning wheel unlike any she had seen before, and the princess was fascinated by it. "What is this? Why is it here?" she asked herself as she approached the spinning wheel. The spinning wheel sparkled with gold and was intricately carved. It looked almost like a magical object. Intricate patterns were engraved on the surface of the spinning wheel, adorned with shimmering jewels. The princess reached out her hand to touch the spindle of the spinning wheel. It was smooth and cold, and she felt a slight tremble at her fingertips. Guided by this tremble, the princess began to turn the spinning wheel. She was curious about how it worked and started winding the thread as she turned the spindle. With each turn of the spindle, a faint sound echoed through the room. In that moment, the spindle pricked her finger. At the moment the princess's finger was pricked by the spindle, she recoiled in sudden pain. But it was too late. As a drop of blood fell from her pricked finger, the princess suddenly felt dizzy. Staggering back, she collapsed to the floor away from the spinning wheel. "Ugh, dizzy," she muttered faintly as her consciousness began to fade. Her vision started to darken. The room seemed to come alive, swirling around her. The worn tapestries on the walls trembled, stirring up dust, and the spinning wheel emitted a low, eerie hum. Despite trying to rise again, the princess found her body unresponsive. Her legs grew weaker, feeling as if weighed down by a heavy burden. Slowly, she sank to the floor, closing her eyes. Her final thoughts were of love and gratitude toward her parents and the people of the kingdom. "Mother, Father, I'm sorry." Her whisper echoed in the room before fading away. Her body lay still on the floor, appearing as if peacefully asleep, though sadness and regret etched her face. At that moment, a wave of magic spread throughout the entire palace. As the curse triggered by the princess's prick on the spinning wheel manifested, everyone in the palace fell into a deep sleep under the spell's influence. The king, the queen, the courtiers, the servants, all fell into slumber right where they stood. The palace fell silent and still as the magic enveloped them. One by one, they succumbed to sleep in their respective places, their breaths slowing until all was quiet. As the curse spread, the palace fell into a deep slumber. The king and queen had done their best to protect the princess, but their efforts were in vain. They collapsed right where they stood as soon as the princess fell victim to the curse, succumbing to a deep sleep. Courtiers and servants followed suit, their eyes closing, their bodies growing cold. Silence enveloped the palace inside and out. No birdsong, no whisper of the wind could be heard. The gardens surrounding the palace gradually turned ash-gray, flowers withered, and trees shed their leaves. Everything felt frozen in time. The magic curse enveloped the entire palace, pulling everyone into a profound sleep. The palace walls grew darker, and the windows were covered in dust, losing their light. The palace gardens were now locked in the silence of death. Once beautiful flower beds wilted, leaving only barren branches where trees once thrived. The pond was filled with murky water, devoid of any signs of life. Animals that once roamed the garden paths disappeared, leaving behind only silence. Flowers lost their vibrancy, drooping their heads, while trees stood eerily bare, shedding their leaves. Traces of neglect lingered throughout the garden, untouched by human hands for a long time. Once beautifully landscaped, the garden was now overrun with weeds and vines, while moss-covered stones around the pond became slippery. Small fountains stood silently without spouting water, and the surrounding water turned dark. Everything in the garden seemed frozen, with only the silence of death remaining. Inside the palace, not even the sound of people's breaths could be heard. The king and queen slept holding hands on their thrones, their faces showing deep anguish and peace simultaneously. In the queen's hand, there was still the small doll the princess used to play with when she was young. In the seemingly frozen palace, the doll appeared to be the only living presence. Courtiers slumbered in the banquet hall, while servants in the kitchen, each frozen in their daily routines, now slept. Time passed, yet the people inside the palace remained deeply asleep. The king and queen slept holding each other's hands, while courtiers and servants were immersed in slumber at their respective places. Though their faces bore an expression of tranquility, beneath it lay sadness and sorrow. The palace seemed frozen in time. The king and queen slept on their thrones, hands clasped tightly. In the queen's hand, there was still the small doll the princess used to play with when she was young. In the seemingly frozen palace, the doll appeared to be the only living presence. Tears, like evidence of their last fight to protect the princess, were caught in the king's eyes. The queen's face held both a smile and sorrow, her dress spreading out as if to embrace the princess. In the banquet hall, courtiers slept in their seats, frozen in the moment they raised their glasses in a toast. Servants in the kitchen halted their meal preparations, their hands still clutching knives and ingredients. Though their faces were filled with celebration for the princess, that moment had come to a standstill. Outside the palace, unaware of what had transpired within, time marched on. Rumors spread of the palace falling into a deep slumber, but the true cause, the curse of magic, remained unknown. The kingdom gradually descended into silence, and people, fearing the curse of the palace, kept their distance. The palace faded further into obscurity, and people, curious yet fearful of what had happened there, dared not approach. As time passed, a dense forest grew around the palace. The trees grew tall, covering the sky, while bushes and vines thrived abundantly. The forest grew denser, and within it, various animals found their habitats. It seemed as if the forest was enveloping and protecting the palace, becoming increasingly dense. The trees grew so tall that they obscured the sky, casting deep shadows. Vines climbed the trees, intertwining and further thickening the forest. Bushes, covered with sharp thorns, made it difficult to tread through the woods. The vines intertwined like living organisms, fortifying the forest, and whenever the wind blew, the thorns clashed, creating sharp sounds. Various animals inhabited the forest. Birds nested in the trees, squirrels darted between them in search of food. Deer and rabbits cautiously navigated through the bushes, while foxes and wolves silently roamed the dark forest. Although the forest teemed with life, deep silence flowed within. This forest completely severed the kingdom and the palace, gradually fading their existence from memory. The trees continued to grow taller, obscuring the sky, and the darkness of the forest deepened. Vines and bushes intertwined, forming massive walls, as if to protect the palace. The forest thickened, and even the sound of the wind couldn't penetrate its density. The palace seemed locked away in a forgotten realm, surrounded by silence. As time passed, the stories of the palace and the forest became legends. People listened to tales of the cursed palace and the people who fell into a deep sleep with a mix of fear and awe. Children listened to these legends from their parents every night, fueling their imagination, while adults cautioned against approaching the palace. In the depths of the forest lies the palace under a deep sleep. It is said that only true love's kiss can awaken the beautiful princess slumbering there. People spoke of this, instilling fear of the palace's curse. Though they lacked the courage to approach it, the legend remained deeply ingrained in their hearts. The story of the palace was passed down through generations, shaping the way people lived. Children, hearing the legend from their parents, imagined adventures to rescue the princess. They dreamt of becoming brave princes, journeying through the forest to reach the palace. Adults remembered the legend, cautioning children against getting too close to the palace. Over time, the palace became a more mysterious place in people's memories. The legend grew more vivid with time. Whenever people spoke of the cursed palace, they felt a mix of fear and reverence, and the story spread to more and more people. Among the villagers, tales of the palace and the princess were constantly circulated, captivating the hearts of many. The princess in the legend slept with a face full of longing, and the story of the prince who would awaken her captured the hearts of the people. One day, a brave prince from a distant kingdom heard the legend and came to find the castle. He made up his mind to venture through the forest to awaken the cursed castle mentioned in the legend. The prince was a man overflowing with courage and determination, with a strong resolve to rescue the princess burning in his heart. With that determination, he embarked on a long and arduous journey. The forest seemed to grow more complex and darker, as if trying to block the prince's path. Giant trees covered the sky, while vines and thorns obstructed his way. The forest floor was covered with thick leaves and mud, causing his feet to sink with each step. Trees intertwined to create dense shadows, and only a few rays of sunlight could penetrate through. Despite these obstacles, the prince overcame them one by one as he pressed forward. He wielded his sword to cut through the thorns and vines, his skin covered in wounds, his clothes torn. Yet, his eyes held a determination never to give up. His pace quickened, fueled by his burning desire to rescue the princess. The darkness and cold of the forest could not break his will. To avoid losing his way, the prince marked trees as he moved forward, carefully examining his surroundings to stay on course. He navigated through the thorns and vines, his hands wounded, his clothes torn, but he never stopped. His eyes shone with a firm resolve to rescue the princess. Though the cold and darkness of the forest threatened to envelop him, his heart blazed with warm passion. Finally, the prince emerged from the dense forest and arrived at the front of the castle. The castle appeared as if it had not awakened from a deep slumber, silent and lonely. The massive castle gates were corroded with age, covered in moss. Weeds grew abundantly in front of the gates, and only the sound of rustling in the wind could be heard. Taking a moment to catch his breath in front of the grand doors of the castle, the prince recalled all the hardships he had endured thus far. His heart was filled with anticipation and hope that he would soon meet the princess. Pushing open the castle's grand doors, they creaked slowly open, revealing a sight that astonished him. The interior of the castle lay silent and dormant, frozen in time. He cautiously stepped inside, his footsteps echoing through the quiet halls. The inside of the castle was filled with dust and cobwebs, untouched by human hands for a long time. The prince walked slowly along the dark corridors. Though adorned with splendid tapestries and paintings, they had lost their luster under layers of dust. The colors of the tapestries were faded, and the paintings appeared blurry due to dust accumulation. A red carpet lined the floor, bearing traces of disuse. Each step the prince took raised puffs of dust from the carpet. At the end of the corridor, he found a staircase and ascended it slowly. As he climbed the stairs, he felt as though time itself had stopped. Dust accumulated on the staircase railing, dispersing as he touched it. With each step closer to the top of the tower, he felt a growing sense of tension and excitement. His heart beat faster, and his hands trembled slightly. The prince made his way to the room at the top of the tower. Carefully, he opened the door and entered. Inside, an old spinning wheel lay, beside which the princess lay asleep. She lay there silently, as if in a deep slumber, with a serene smile upon her face and her hand resting near the spinning wheel. The room was dimly lit by a light filtering in through the window, casting a soft glow. The spinning wheel showed signs of age, corroded with rust and covered in dust and cobwebs. The princess's bed was adorned with luxurious curtains, now faded in color due to dust. Next to her bed stood a small table, upon which lay a bouquet of withered flowers and an old book. Approaching the princess, the prince gazed upon her. Her beauty still shone, and her face radiated with profound tranquility. Slowly, he reached out his hand to awaken her. Taking her hand in his, he drew close to her face. Her skin was fair as snow, her hair shimmering like gold. Though her lips were red and soft, her eyes remained closed, yet within them, deep peace resided. Gently, the prince kissed her forehead. As his lips touched her skin, it felt as if time stood still. In that moment, the princess's eyes slowly opened, and a smile graced her lips. She blinked slowly, gazing upon the prince before her. Her eyes were warm and tender, her smile bright and warm like the sunshine of spring. As the princess opened her eyes, a wave of magic spread throughout the entire palace, lifting its enchantment. The tapestries and paintings adorning the walls regained their brilliance, and the floor's tiles reclaimed their original colors. Dust and cobwebs vanished, and the palace began to regain its vitality. It seemed as though the entire palace had been infused with a new lease on life alongside the princess's awakening. The king and queen, along with the courtiers and servants, began to awaken one by one. They struggled to understand where they were and what had happened. The king and queen looked at each other, shedding tears of joy at their reunion. They hurried to the princess's chamber and embraced her. "Princess, you're finally awake," exclaimed the king and queen, their voices filled with joy. Tears welled up in their eyes, and their faces were filled with happiness and relief. The palace gradually regained its vitality. The tapestries and paintings adorning the walls regained their vivid colors. Intricately woven tapestries, rich in reds and blues, seemed to come to life as if newly made. The dust disappeared from the paintings, revealing their original beauty with vibrant colors and delicate details. The floor's tiles regained their original crimson hue, adding a warm atmosphere to the entire palace. The king and queen, along with the courtiers and servants, began to awaken one by one. They struggled to understand where they were and what had happened. The king and queen looked at each other, shedding tears of joy at their reunion. They hurried to the princess's chamber and embraced her. "Princess, you're finally awake," exclaimed the king and queen, their voices filled with joy. Tears welled up in their eyes, and their faces were filled with happiness and relief. The attendants and servants also began to awaken one by one, looking at each other as they did. They struggled to understand how they had fallen asleep and how they had awakened. Soon, they realized that life had returned to the entire palace with the princess's awakening. They began to move busily again to return to their daily routines. In the kitchen, fires were lit once more, and the banquet hall buzzed with people once again. The palace came back to life, and everyone was engulfed in a festive atmosphere. The king and queen congratulated the princess and the prince, opening a grand banquet in their honor. The banquet hall was beautifully decorated, filled with delicious food and drinks. Musicians played beautiful melodies, enhancing the festive mood. The hall was adorned with flowers of various colors, their fragrance enchanting everyone. Golden and silver decorations sparkled on the walls, while magnificent chandeliers illuminated the ceiling. Tables were set with silver candelabras and fine tableware, and a variety of delicious dishes were served. Fruits, desserts, meat dishes, and seafood were abundantly laid out, and people picked their favorite foods, engaging in conversations. The king and queen mingled with the guests, listening to their stories and exchanging congratulations. The princess and the prince danced at the center of the hall, confirming their love. Their dance was graceful and beautiful, as if under a spell. The princess wore a long dress that swayed gently with her movements, while the prince held her hand, smiling as he looked at her. Their eyes were full of love and happiness. The palace came back to life, and people were filled with new hope and joy. The princess and the prince walked hand in hand through the banquet hall. They looked into each other's eyes, sharing their expectations and hopes for the future ahead. Their love breathed new vitality into the entire palace. The banquet hall was still brimming with a festive atmosphere, and people cheered and blessed. Every corner of the hall shimmered with dazzling decorations and bright lights. People gathered around, chatting, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. The king and queen blessed the princess and the prince, wishing them happiness and peace in their future. At the center of the banquet hall, a large table was set with a variety of dishes beautifully arranged. Fruits, desserts, meat dishes, and seafood were abundantly laid out. People picked their favorite foods, engaging in conversations. The king and queen mingled with the guests, listening to their stories and exchanging congratulations. The musicians played beautiful melodies, further enhancing the atmosphere of the banquet. People danced to the music, and children held hands, twirling around and singing songs. The banquet hall was like a scene from a dream, filled with beauty and fantasy. The princess and the prince danced together at the center of the hall, confirming their love. The entire kingdom celebrated the awakening of the princess and the prince with joy. People gathered in front of the palace to congratulate their happiness. Villagers brought flowers and food, adding to the festive atmosphere, while children held hands, danced, and sang songs. The square in front of the palace was filled with people, all laughing and enjoying together. The king and queen spoke to the crowd in front of the palace, announcing the awakening of the princess and the prince. Our princess and prince have awakened once again. This is all thanks to your love and sacrifices. Now, our kingdom will embrace peace and prosperity once more. The people cheered and applauded at the king's words, their faces filled with joy and hope. The villagers held hands and danced in celebration. The square was lively and bustling like a grand festival marketplace. Children held colorful balloons and ran around, while adults laughed and conversed with each other. Bright smiles adorned people's faces, and their eyes sparkled with happiness and joy. On one side of the square, rides and games were set up, and people enjoyed various games, bursting into laughter. Young children rode carousels, while adults enjoyed darts and shooting games. Food stalls offered a variety of delicious dishes, and people enjoyed the festive atmosphere while savoring the food. The streets were filled with tantalizing smells, and vendors welcomed guests with wide smiles. People indulged in roasted meat, fresh fruit, and sweet desserts, sharing food with each other. Large cakes and bread were popular, and ice cream and cotton candy were favorites among the children. After the wedding ceremony, a grand reception of blessings was held in the palace. The banquet hall was adorned with splendid flowers, their fragrance enchanting everyone. Golden and silver decorations sparkled on the walls, while magnificent chandeliers illuminated the ceiling. Silver candlesticks and exquisite tableware adorned each table, which was laden with a variety of delicious foods. Fruits, desserts, meat dishes, and seafood were abundantly displayed, and people selected their favorite dishes while engaging in conversation. The princess and the prince danced together at the center of the banquet hall, confirming their love. Their dance was elegant and beautiful, as if enchanted by magic. The princess wore a long dress that swayed gracefully with her movements, accentuating her beauty. The prince held her hand, smiling as he gazed at her. Their eyes were filled with love and happiness. People admired and applauded their dance, expressing admiration and congratulations. As their dance concluded, the crowd erupted into applause once again, celebrating their love with resounding cheers. The musicians played livelier tunes, further elevating the atmosphere of the banquet hall. People resumed dancing, and the hall reverberated with cheers and laughter. After the wedding, the kingdom became even more peaceful and prosperous. People, inspired by the love of the princess and the prince, shared warmer hearts with each other. The entire kingdom united as one, embracing a new era. The king and queen entrusted the princess and the prince with maintaining the peace of the kingdom. Your love and courage have revived our kingdom. We hope you will continue to trust and rely on each other to safeguard our kingdom, they said. The princess and the prince engraved their words in their hearts, pledging to govern the kingdom peacefully. The people of the kingdom were deeply moved by the love and courage of the princess and the prince. They helped each other, worked together, and exerted efforts for the prosperity of the kingdom. Farmers reaped bountiful harvests, merchants engaged in lively trade, and artists created beautiful works, enriching the culture and arts of the kingdom. The kingdom flourished day by day, and people shared kindness and love with each other. The villages thrived with vitality, and people lived happily every day. The princess and the prince, with their love, protected the kingdom and brought hope and joy to the people. you.